Get in on the action this season with Underdog's Pick'em game. Select higher or lower between 2 and 8 players and compete for up to 325 times your entry. Use code DIRECTOR when signing up to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Go to Bolt fam, it's the Director. Chargers fans, we got ourselves a pretty big game coming up on Sunday. You got the Chargers, you got the Raiders, in a game that, honestly, we're at that point of the season where you're looking at playoff scenarios every single week, and this one is no different, as the Chargers, with the win here, do keep their playoff hopes very much so alive, but a loss really puts them behind the mark where you want to see. So, I mean, honestly, any given Sunday, you understand, the situation. We've seen it a lot this season already, but it feels like a must win. It feels like a pretty realistic win, if I'm being honest with myself, but it's not going to come easy. The Raiders never let it do that. So we're going to go into the ins and outs of this game, see what we can expect. Should be a pretty good one. Before we do get into it, man, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog. Use code DIRECTOR and get $100 in bonus funds, guys. $5 when you throw down gets you $100 in bonus funds. One of the best deals out there. Use code DIRECTOR to receive that special bonus. And if you guys want some picks, I'm rolling with this right now. Always make sure to check for those specials, those tokens. I got the Stephen Curry special that I stacked on top of some of the guys I like for this week. I got Justin Herbert with the 1.5 passing touchdowns and Geno Smith with the interception. All right, should be a good one. Before we do get into it, man, shout out, or I should say, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. The small amount of time you guys take, hit the like, sub, and bell notification. Helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action.
Who's got it better than us?
Your Chargers at Raiders, or I should say versus Raiders game preview. Again, this is going to be a pretty interesting one, man. We got a lot going on in this game in terms of what's at stake. The Chargers and its fans obviously looking to see the team improve their playoff odds. And if I'm being honest with you guys, it gets a little sketchier every day. Like, honestly, there are some games that really did put us behind the mark of where we wanted to see. I think seeing the Broncos kind of climb so high has been a bit concerning for Chargers fans, and it feels like now is the time. If you want to jump the Chiefs, now is the time to do it. And the Chargers really do need to get some giddy up in their step, because every day that they fall a little bit further behind, the Broncos are taking advantage of that opportunity that and vacancy that the Chiefs have left in their place. So let's jump into real quickly some of the players to expect to see in this game. The injury list here, definitely going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. Omari and Hampton, limited practice. He was just activated off of IR. Doesn't expect to play this game, which is very, very interesting. I expected Omari and Hampton to be out there for this one. You were going to, see that rivalry once again in him and Ashton Genty, but, maybe one more week and we'll get to see him out there and put on a show for Chargers fans. We also got Trey Harris and Tito to be looking after as well. Tito is also coming back from IR, so we're not quite sure if he's going to be suiting up for this one, but more or less good to see fewer names on this list than we're used to as Chargers fans. And then on the Raiders side of things, again, a lot of unspecifieds on here. Max Crosby looks like he should play. Limited practice for Tyler Lockett. Not practicing is Michael Mayer, very good tight end for them. And then Adam Butler also not practicing. But for the most part, it's not going to be as dramatic as other games that we've seen this year in terms of injury. So let's get into some of the storylines in this one. Starting off on the Raiders side of things. Man, dude, this Geno Smith situation is out of control. Did you guys see what happened to Geno Smith last week versus the Browns? The dude took 10 sacks from the Browns in that game. Myles Garrett was walking him, around the corner, around the block, teaching him a thing or two about, welcome to the NFL and how brutal life can be. And, dude, it's been very, very interesting to see Geno Smith's season this year unfold. At the top of the year, I was a little worried that he would see that resurgence that he saw with Seattle. And And I don't know if that really happened, especially after they decided to extend him. You guys remember that? They gave him another contract or an extension on the contract, and we were all expecting to see, the results of that come out and play on the field, and it's just been kind of an awful season for him. 13 interceptions to 13 touchdowns. Pretty bad. But the thing I think that we wanted to focus in on this one was the sacks. 10 sacks last week. A total 20 sacks over the last, is it 2 games? Did I write that down correctly? 20 times over the last 3 games, is absolutely insane. Which shows you the opportunity for the Chargers to get in there and find some success in pressuring Geno Smith, which, like we just stated, translates to mistakes, translates to turnovers when it comes to his play this year. Man, Geno, Chargers fans, we understand, dude. Like, we see Justin Herbert running for his life. We're very upset about the state of the offensive line, but can you guys imagine 20 sacks over the last 3 games? Absolutely absurd. Now, Geno can still throw the football pretty well. He's been averaging around 215 yards a game. But it really does come down to, can he capitalize and can he keep the ball in their possession? 13 scores is not a lot at this point of the season. Week 13, that's 1 touchdown a week on average. And then 13 picks, you can say the same thing, is also very insane. So, I don't know, man. I think the Chargers and their pass rush, they have a very decent chance at rattling Geno Smith, making him uncomfortable, and putting us in the column for more turnovers forced this week, which could really, really help the Chargers' odds at putting this one away early, hopefully. Keeping Geno Smith uncomfortable and pressured is going to be very, very important in this one. And I think equally as important, it's going to also be keeping Geno Smith throwing the football. The Chargers do have an opportunity to make that happen, as Ashton Jeanty has not panned out very well this season, man, which is crazy because, he was one of those players that, despite maybe the perfect offensive line and the perfect offense, I felt that he was going to be, one of those players to watch. He's going to be very, highly touted in fantasy football. He's going to produce and give you the big flashes. It just has not been there this season for Ashton Jeanty. And it's one that, it's going to dictate how this game plays out a little bit. He's averaging just around 3.6 yards per carry. He has not been, panning out very well. He also had that ankle injury. Did we just see him on the injury report a second ago? Let's go double check that just to make sure. Ashton Jeanty not listed on the injury report as of right now. So, maybe that's been put behind him. But he just hasn't been panning out very well. And the Chargers, yes, not a great run defense. I would certainly say it's not a terrible opportunity for Ashton Jeanty to have a bounce-back game. But that's going to be one of the primary focuses for me on defense, is keeping him off the field, limiting his productivity and his yards, because you want to put the Raiders in a position where they need to pass the football more often than not. So Ashton Jeanty, he's been more or less bad this season, but also in a really bad situation, right? He's a product of that terrible Raiders offense that's just not found their footing, and the Pete Carroll situation doesn't help things either. And it's been an awful go at it for them so far. So we'll circle back around to that here in just a second as we do look at some of the Chargers players to watch this week. Starting with Justin Herbert, who you can see it on his face, man. This dude is ready for redemption. Last week, 2 weeks ago now, after the bye week, 2 weeks ago now, the worst game, I think, in Justin Herbert's career. Did we witness that? I'm pretty sure that was the case, where he didn't even eclipse 100 yards. It was absolutely so hard to watch. That's what I'm trying to get at. That offense that time, that game was just so bad. And I think it's time for a bounce back for Justin Herbert, who we know is much better than that. He's been, in the MVP conversation for a majority of the season. And I think it's time and appropriate for him to redeem himself here. And it's against an opponent that, the Raiders defense is sneakily not as bad as you would think, but they do allow a pretty healthy amount of yards through the air. I think it was on average around like 215 or something like that. And in the way they run their defense, their scheme, I think Herbert stands a pretty good chance to have a pretty good day, a good backup, or I should say good bounce back, rather than just hitting the average of 215 that the Raiders are allowing. And that's because of what the Raiders passing defense has been averaging this season. They are very heavy in terms of zone coverage. And Justin Herbert grades very, very well versus zone coverage. Vegas runs that the second most in the league. So we're talking about redemption. We're talking about Justin Herbert coming back and having that bounce back game. We're talking about a defense that, is not, suited very well to stop a Justin Herbert. I think you're going to see something nice here. Not to mention Justin Herbert's, track record versus the Raiders over, the last couple of games. 600 yards against Vegas over their last 2 games combined. I think you're going to see old style Justin Herbert come back, and they're going to need him. Obviously, I think everybody knows what's at stake this game. Got to keep your playoff hopes alive and well, and it's kind of crazy the contrast of with a win, you're looking pretty good. With the loss, holy crap. It's going to be a tough climb out of that hole, man, especially if you lose versus an opponent like the Raiders. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about Khalil Mack. The defense, in my opinion, is going to be one that really is the reason you win or lose this game. Justin Herbert and the offense, yes, they're starting to find their footing. They're starting to look good, but the defense is really in the best position for this one, in my opinion, because of how bad the Raiders have been, how bad, like we went over with, Geno Smith and how many times he's turning over the ball. Not to mention there's fumble issues. There's a whole lot of bad going on in terms of the Raiders offense. So that just gives the Chargers defense a prime opportunity to make something happen. And like we stated, with the Geno Smith segment, 10 sacks last week tells you that there's some big, big problems on that offensive line. And one of the best players to capitalize on a weakness like that versus this particular opponent is going to be Khalil Mack. Okay? You're seeing what's going on with Geno. You're seeing the kind of pressure he's under. And then you look at Khalil Mack's average versus the Raiders over his career, which is around a sack and a half per game through 9 contests. You got to kind of put 2 and 2 together and say, okay, the pass rush is going to have at least a pretty decent day, okay? And it's not just Khalil Mack out there, causing issues for opponents. Over the last, I'm going to say 5 or 6 weeks, for a majority of their games, the Chargers have been a pretty good pass rushing team with Mack, yes, but also Tooley, who's been very underrated as one of the league's better pass rushers right now. You have Odafe Owe, who they just traded for, who's been logging a decent amount of sacks. I think recently he slowed down a little bit, but we've seen him working very well, over the past, or since he was traded to the Chargers. What was that, like 5 or 6 weeks ago? Very excited about him. You got Justin Aboigbe, who's been looking really good in this season. Year 2 in the NFL for him. So you kind of add up what the Chargers have been doing recently. You take a look at how bad the Raiders look in terms of their offensive line. You say to yourself, okay, there's an opportunity here to really cause some havoc. And I think, again, I say this all the time when it comes to Jesse Minter's defense, that really is kind of the foundation of what makes everything work. Pressure, 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 pressure. And from what we're seeing in terms of, sample size here, Raiders offensive line sucks. Very bad. Chargers, edge has been producing. You got Khalil Mack, who's historically very good. Let's go out there and cause some trouble for Geno Smith. And then on top of that, you got to consider what that's going to translate to in turnovers. I'd be fascinated if anybody can find a stat on that. Pressures generated over the season that have translated into turnovers. So it should be really cool for the Chargers, or I should say it should be pretty fun to see the Chargers out there actually making some plays and making defense pretty fun to watch this week. Not to mention, man, these uniforms, dude, the ones that I'm wearing right now, the throwbacks, I can't even tell you how clean they are, how awesome Khalil Mack looks in this. I was really hoping to see Omari and Hampton suit up in one of these jerseys this season, but it is what it is, right? And he may get another chance. I think they're also suiting up versus the Texans in these jerseys, so we're hoping to see him out for that one. Speaking of which, the run game. Now, we do know that Omari and Hampton is not going to be out for this one. But Kamani Vidal has looked pretty good. The Raiders as a whole, though, they just haven't been very exposed versus the run this season. I think they average, I don't know, somewhere around 100 and something yards per game. So they're not terrible, but they're definitely not easy to run against. So the Chargers, it feels like they're going to be leaning more towards a passing attack once again this week. Maybe get Kamani Vidal involved again too. But man, I'm just so bummed that we didn't get to see Omari and Hampton out there in the Navies, which would have been pretty crazy. But it is what it is. Hopefully we do see him back versus, would it be the Eagles? Woo! I don't know about you. I was watching the game earlier today, too, and the Bears were running all over the Eagles, so maybe the Chargers stand a chance there. But like I said, I think you're going to be seeing more of a passing game this week, in which you're going to be looking for talents like guys like Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey, who are probably the two primary guys I'll be looking for this week versus the Raiders, given the Chargers situation. The Raiders aren't the only team with a terrible offensive line on their hands right now. The Chargers definitely have a problem there, and Justin Herbert has been running for his life. Sure, he's been better avoiding sacks than Geno Smith, but he has been pressured as much as any quarterback in football right now, and that's why I think the primary guys I'm going to be looking for in this one is going to be Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey. Not to say that, Quentin Johnson and Gadsden, maybe even Trey Harris, don't play a nice role in this one, especially with Quentin's big playability, but Keenan and Ladd, they're just kind of players that you need in a game that you got to get rid of the ball pretty quickly, right? These guys tied for most receptions in their last game, and I'm going to say it's mainly because they were carving up the Raiders from the slot, and that's exactly what you're looking for if you're Justin Herbert, right? Herbert, he's going to be looking very quickly at the flats. He's going to be looking very quickly on those quick slants and just quick plays in general. Who's going to be open? And right now on the Chargers roster, the two guys that get open most consistently are Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey. And if you can find these guys often, I feel like you'll see a lot of success, considering that they have historically been pretty good versus the Raiders. The Raiders defense is going to struggle versus the Chargers offense, considering how good Justin Herbert is versus zone. And I feel like Keenan and Ladd are going to be the constant flow of what keeps the Chargers moving forward in this one. So I think Herbert's going to have a pretty decent time looking for one of these guys. Get rid of the ball as quick as possible and show off the elite route running you still have in Keenan Allen and the separation you have in Ladd McConkey, and just play as methodically as possible. Get the offense going, get the pass game moving and grooving. And I think you're not going to have too many issues. I'm not going to say that because the offensive line is bad and there is Max Crosby out there to worry about, Mad Max out there to worry about. But it's definitely very important to get the ball out quickly if you're Justin Herbert. But you got the right weapons in hand to make it happen. On defense, like we mentioned with Khalil Mack, you want to get the pressure out there. You want to give opportunities for the defense to generate turnovers. That's why I think the secondary is going to be pretty important in this one, in particular Derwin James. Capitalizing on those turnover opportunities, very, very important. Chargers are pretty good at it. I'm not too worried there. But the one big weapon that I am concerned about is Brock Bowers. He still remains as the biggest threat on that team, in my opinion. And I think Derwin James, as in many situations when we're facing elite tight ends, gives us the best chance at slowing him down. And I think it's pretty important that in particular this game we focus in on the tight end position because of how much he's accounted for in the Raiders offense. Brock Bowers, it has accounted for 30% of the team's total receiving yards over the last 4 games. That is actually crazy. So if Derwin James can get in there and slow him down, we're talking about wiping off the board a pretty big chunk of the Raiders' offense. And Derwin's up to the challenge, right? We've seen him shut down guys, or at least slow down guys like Travis Kelce and Darren Waller this season. And we've seen him versus Brock Bowers before. I feel like he can do it again. So Derwin James going to be a big part of the defense on this one. But low-key, maybe one of the most underrated players of the entire game in this one, for me, is going to be maybe a bit shocking to you guys. Oh, is it going to be Oronde Gadsden? No, is it going to be Tarheeb Still or Deion Henley? All very important, yeah. But I think one of the most important players, that's not being talked about is going to be Teair Tart. And this is because, like we've alluded to several times in this video, the Chargers are going to have one pretty big objective in front of them. Make sure Geno Smith is throwing the football as much as possible, okay? And in order to do that, you want to make sure one of the biggest things the Raiders can do to help themselves this week is get the run game going. You cannot allow that to get going, especially early. And your best weapon on defense to make that happen is Tier Tart. Okay. Luckily, we do have Tito Agbonia also coming back. That's going to be pretty good. I think a lot of people forget how good he is versus the run as well, especially when you pair him with Tier Tart and you get those guys in nice rotation. But Tart is kind of the leader on that interior defensive line, in my opinion. He's been one of the best players we've had this season. The Chargers' run defense has not been very good, but Tier Tart individually versus the run has been very good. And he's going to be a big reason why I think we win or lose this game. If he individually can stop or at least slow down Ashton Genty and force the Raiders to go to the pass more often than not, I think you're looking at a pretty good opportunity for the Chargers defense to capitalize and get the football back for their quarterback. Pretty important. Not to mention, the kind of pressure that Tier Tart individually can generate from the interior. He's not bad in that capacity either. So I don't know, man. I think a sneaky X factor for the Bolts in this one, and I do think he'd be up to the challenge. And especially with all of these guys, I kind of wanted to close with this before I give you guys a score prediction. All these guys coming off the bye, a very needed bye, one that a lot of players, yes, injured, dinged up, whatever, but just a lot of guys need to regroup, refocus, and find themselves, because you see a whole lot of guys that were so good at the top of the season really struggling right now. Tier Tart isn't struggling, but he was definitely better at the top of the season. Kai Becton, so good at the top of the season, kind of not great right now. You can say that about a lot of players. I think after the bye week, hopefully we see a whole lot of improvement from guys that maybe have been struggling up to this point. So with that, guys, very important game. I think the Chargers know how important this one is. They're going to have to come in swinging. Hopefully they're not dragging behind them, the injuries and the fatigue of that loss from the Jacksonville Jaguars game and all the struggles leading up to that point. Hopefully this bye week is a turning point for this team that really helps them get back in the groove of how good they were in the first, 6 weeks or so. And we see a nice, form of the Chargers that give us confidence of them hopefully getting into the postseason. So with that, I got the Chargers winning this one 26-13. Hopefully you see an even better score than that, but I think a win is most important here to keep their odds at making the postseason nice and healthy. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been the Director, and apologize for any hiccups in the show. We got kind of a new setup here in terms of monitors and stuff, so we're trying to get kind of used to the new setup here, but it's been a good one. I cannot wait for the game on Sunday. You'll catch it here live on YouTube, or I should say me commentating and watch partying the game with you guys. It should be a good time. But we'll catch you guys later. Happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, and bolt up, baby. Let's go get that win on Sunday. Let's go!